first, let's bring in tonight's panel, Federal MP Andrew Wallace and filmmaker Ali Tabrizi. Thank you for joining me, guys. Ali, we are 1 week on from Charlie Kirk's murder. Have you been shocked by the reaction we've seen?
I've been shocked, but it's also nothing new from the radical left, where we've seen for about a decade or more their claim to have the moral high ground on absolutely everyone. And we've seen this clash where we've understood that actually every position they take now is a contradiction. We've seen, say, people explicitly or in a more subtle way come out and say, well, he was homophobic, he deserved what he got. And I'm sorry, haven't we just seen people, for the last 2 years claim that every person that dies in Gaza is an absolute tragedy, yet we have polls from 2018 that show that 95% of people in Gaza have homophobic views. Now, that's not to say anything should happen to those people because of that view, but this is just to demonstrate the moral hypocrisy of the radical left. Now, I want to make one thing extremely clear. The bullet that killed Charlie Kirk has your name on it and it has my name on it. The intersectional framework, which competes victimhood one against the other, is coming for everyone. And we've seen this rot take place inside the universities. After the death of George Floyd, we saw calls to defund the police. And I think it's about time we make a similar call, but this time to defund the universities, particularly the ones who are engaged in this kind of radical, Marxist, postmodern attitude, likely to have a lot of funding coming from Qatar. And so we need to address the rot taking place in the universities if we actually want to see this problem go away. Whatever happens to Tyler Robinson, whether he gets the death penalty or not, I don't think that's going to make the problem go away. We need to address the root cause, and until then, we're going to see more of this violence take place into the future. We already saw masses of people come out online, and it was overrepresented in the demographic of teachers and professors at universities and schools who are publicly celebrating this. So I'd like to see more attention be put there. Charlie Kirk was an incredible man. He was a man of faith, he was a family man, and a kind of modern-day apostle. He crisscrossed the country, giving speeches. To some he was light, to others he was darkness, but nevertheless people flocked to him, and he was always willing to shake the hand of his opponents to honour the free speech of his enemy. And I'd like to see the conservative side hold that ground, and so that we don't fall into the same trap that we've seen for the last 10 years coming from the radical left, where they're willing to cancel absolutely everyone. I was shocked to see that clip from Mark Ruffalo saying that we're going to be living under Taliban-like conditions. What an absolute insult to everyone who's actually lived under the Taliban system, under the Taliban regime, or under the Islamic regime. This is absolute privilege from Hollywood actors, par excellence, okay? So, look, there's a lot to say on this issue. It's a tragedy, but let's make one thing clear. There is a kind of prophecy or a prophetic nature to Charlie Kirk's death, in that his life's work was Turning Point USA, but his death has been the real Turning Point USA, and we've seen the US change its course just over the last 7 days.
I could not say it better myself, Ali. You've put it so well. And I graduated from Sydney Uni recently, and I can tell you it's more of an indoctrination factory than an educational institution.
Absolutely.
A lot of the time. Andrew, you're a public figure. You're a member of Parliament. Does this growing assassination culture where you can justify murdering people purely because you have different political views, does that concern you?
Well, of course it does, Freya. I think every public official around the Western world is very concerned about the fractious nature of politics at the moment. The left is moving further to the left, the right is moving further to the right. Look, violence is never justified. Those people who are out there saying, well, for whatever reason they disagree with Charlie Kirk or any other type of ideology, then the ends justifies the means. That is absolutely abhorrent to our system, our beliefs, our values here in Australia and around the Western world. I think we've forgotten how to debate in a civil manner, and I absolutely believe that is the case here in Australia. Not just in Australia, but around the Western world. We need to return civility to politics, in my view. We all need to take a cold shower. People are entitled to their views. But where we're seeing this kind of this rank, debauched behaviour that celebrates when someone is assassinated, it really just defies belief. Makes me very sad.
Yeah, no, it does. And it's so un-Australian, and it's actually anti-Western civilization. It's anti-everything our society is based upon, which is that you can have disagreements and you can express them without murdering your opponents. But this undoes all of that. Now, I want to turn to the Middle East now. Hamas has ominously released what it calls a parting image of the 48 remaining hostages still being held in Gaza. Now, Israel is starting its campaign on Gaza City, which is really the last stronghold of Hamas. At the same time, 25 top US Republicans have written a letter to Anthony Albanese, Mark Carney from Canada, and a number of other Western leaders who want to recognise the state of Palestine, urging them not to, saying this is actually rewarding Hamas. Ali, tell us about the hypocrisy. While Hamas is releasing propaganda material, bragging about holding hostages, we've got our Prime Minister swanning off to New York to go vote to recognise a Palestinian state. How does this do anyone any good?
Look, it's an insult to common sense is what it is. I mean, what we're seeing is the incentivization of hostage diplomacy. You know, in my early childhood, I grew up in the Islamic Republic of Iran. On my first day of school, I was made to chant death to America, death to England. Today, they would take someone like me as a hostage to try and get billions out of, Australia or the UK governments, which I hold passports to. What is happening here is that Western countries who have no understanding of how the Middle East actually work, who have no idea how the Islamist ideology really works, operating as if they're just trying to almost invite the fox into the chicken coop. What they'll be doing by recognising a Palestinian state is not creating more peace. It will create more war. And by incentivising hostage diplomacy, Australia is shooting itself in the foot in more ways than one. Not only is it cutting its ties from Israel, who offer a huge amount of intelligence to countries like Australia to do counterterrorism, severing that tie. They're severing their ties to Australia and rewarding a terrorist organisation and basically rewarding its actions over the last 2 years, which has seen both Israelis suffer and people in Gaza suffer. I came on the show about 2 weeks ago and I said, look, if this is a genocide, it would be the easiest genocide in the world to end in 5 seconds flat. All they'd have to do is release the hostages. Them waving these 48 hostages in front of everyone's face is an insult because it says that, hey, we have your nations gripped so tightly with our ideology that we can even wave the hostages in front of your face. If we release, this is all end tomorrow, and yet your leaders will still toe the line and do whatever we tell them to. Okay. Now, look, we don't know the inside scoop, but it seems like the actions of the Australian government and also France and also the UK, it's to the benefit of these terrorist groups, and it's not clear where their allegiance really lies.
For sure. Well, Andrew, as our Member of Parliament, can give us the inside scoop. Do you think Albanese will actually end up with a meeting with Trump at the UN? Is that even on the cards? And I guess, as I discussed in my editorial, why would the US give Albanese a meeting at this point when he's betraying him on so many issues? Defence, Israel, energy. I mean, I get why we've kind of been put in the naughty corner.
Well, I haven't heard it called that one before, Freya. Good line. But look, it's really important that our leaders are at the UN, the Leaders' Week of the UN General Assembly. It's important that the world leaders come together at least once a year. But you're right, Australia is in the naughty corner. And the US and Australia are doing this real sort of uneasy dance at the moment because the letter of the 20-odd US Republicans that have come out absolutely lambasting the Prime Minister and this Labor government for recognising Palestine as a very good example and putting it very clearly on the table that there will be consequences, or at the very least there could be consequences. The United States is Australia's closest military ally, and Australia continues to throw sand in the US's face. The US has been very clear in relation to defence expenditure. It expects its allies to up the ante, to pull their weight. NATO countries are now, with the exception of one country, is now spending 5% of GDP, or committed to spending 5% of GDP on defence. We are still stuck at 2%, and Anthony Albanese continues to say that only we will decide how much we get to spend, and that's fine. We're a sovereign country, but when you look at people that are experts in this country, people like Angus Houston, people like Peter Jennings, our defence experts are saying we need to be spending at least 3 to 3.5% at least on defence, and we are still stuck at 2%. So we are throwing sand in the face of our most important ally, the United States, and the US president has got, I think, every justification to be pretty upset with the Australian Prime Minister. As to whether they meet at the UN General Assembly, well, you know, your guess is as good as mine. It'll be, I'm going to make sure I have plenty of popcorn on hand, ready to watch it if it does happen.
Oh, goodness. And you're right, as the world is moving towards the US, the world is ramping up defence expenditure. Australia seems to be going backwards towards China, not lifting defence. It's like, what planet is Albanese living on? Andrew, just quickly before we go, we only have a minute or so left. New regulations came out this week about how the social media ban for under 16s would work. Now, I know you are someone who is active behind the scenes in the coalition, pushing for this to be adopted as policy. Have you had a chance to look over those regulations? And do you think they strike the right balance between protecting children from social media, but also protecting privacy at the same time?
Well, it's really important that the government gets the balance right here, and there are means and ways of doing that. We know that there are companies that are actually doing this right now. Companies like Connect ID, Andrew Black was on Sky just a couple of weeks ago talking about how his business is actually already providing this age assurance very accurately without storing information. It is happening now. Look, the social media companies want people to believe that this is all too hard, that it's all going to be, peering into people's private lives and impacting on their privacy. That is not correct. We have to get the balance right. That is absolutely right. But, look, if you've transacted in real estate over the last 2 years, you are giving more details of yourself to companies than what we're talking about under these regulations. So it's possible, it's important. We can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, and we've got to ensure that we're protecting young people's lives because it is costing lives. Social media is costing lives in Australia, and governments cannot sit back and allow that to happen.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to watch how it evolves. Ali Tabrizi and Andrew Wallace, thank you so much for joining me.
Authorised by Andrew Wallace, LNP, Boccarina, Queensland.